Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Kellie De Leon from Treasure Data, and we are partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT CDOIQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Doug Laney, noted author and Data and Analytics Strategy Innovation Fellow at West Monroe. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, Kelly. Great to be with you.
I know you also wrote about how Amazon has utilized this process of having the product manager actually write an internal facing press release that is touting the features of the new product. And I wonder if you can just kind of share why you feel like that's an effective element of product development and management. And, do you think more folks should be employing this approach?
Absolutely. I love this idea too. It's a visioning technique that many companies use in one form or another to kind of project the future in some kind of tangible way, whether it's a press release or something in writing or a visual. We use it actually internally at West Monroe for our new consultants. They're required to write a letter from themselves several years from now describing their career and their accomplishments. It helps them kind of visualize where they want to go and how to get there. So yeah, I think visualizing the future and using that to design is important. And I think the same works for designing, or at least envisioning, any kind of product or data product. And I guess on a related note, there's a piece that a colleague, Michael Smith, and I wrote at Gartner, suggesting that you could actually use the future vision or intentions of a system to pay for it today. So how are we going to use data that's collected by some operational system, and how are we going to use that data to drive business value? You can borrow against the value of that data to help develop the system today. And it was an interesting concept that we wrote about. And again, I think I published a bit about that in Infonomics as well.
Wow, I'll have to check that out. That's something that we think about a lot in customer data platform space as well, because the way enterprises think about using the customer data platform, there's what are we going to accomplish in the first 6 months and the first year of those use cases, but then what does that roadmap look like 2 years, 3 years down? And it's really when you start looking at the massive impact that it can have when you're at a wider lens of those use cases that you can see, the hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue impact. And when you can see that roadmap, it's a lot easier to think about year one. So I love that lens of, kind of thinking about what does that look like?
You have to be able to see it clearly. You have to be able to measure that probable future economic benefits if you're going to borrow against it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, another, big data trend that we're seeing is large brands really productizing and licensing their data. This goes to that, who owns the data question that we touched on a little bit earlier. But we have these brands sort of productizing, licensing their data, even though they're not necessarily data brokers as their, primary business. Can you just kind of share some examples and kind of your view of this interesting trend?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I wish I could share some of the examples about how at West Monroe we're helping some of our clients in the healthcare and manufacturing and financial services and energy spaces, identify millions of dollars in incremental value by monetizing their data. All I can say is that it's been really crazy lately trying to keep up with all the demand for this kind of work. It's really something that's kind of taking off. Other companies have been more public about it. So, for example, Dollar General started making its inventory and sales and shopping basket data available to its CPG suppliers, for a price, to license that data. And the next thing they have a self-funding data lake, which I think is this concept of a self-funding data lake or data warehouse or data mesh, self-funding data environment, I think should be a primary goal for any chief data officer today. Another fun example is a startup called Food Genius. Started here in Chicago. They scrape restaurant menu data from across the interwebs. I think they have a relationship with Grubhub as well. And they identify trending dishes, ingredients, pricing, and then the kind of red and white spots for certain kinds of restaurants throughout the country. So what happened was that the major food supplier, US Foods, saw this and realized how invaluable all this data and insights could be to their own sales and marketing efforts. So they ended up gobbling up the company. No pun intended. Yeah, pun intended. And another is another good fun story is Allstate Insurance, and I can talk about this. They talk about it publicly. Their chief data officer approached us several years ago, lamenting how a certain automobile company was willing to pay them for access to Allstate's claims data. This would be a win-win-win. Better and safer cars for the consumer, more competitive cars for the automaker, lower loss ratios for the insurance company. But because they're, the good hands company, right? That's their motto. They couldn't be seen as sharing their customer data, even if the PII were redacted and the data was synthesized or anonymized or aggregated. So, I said to them, well, this isn't a technology or a data issue or even a business issue. It's a reputational issue. So, why not take this idea off brand and start a new company or a joint venture or something? And in fact, that's just what they did. Somebody actually took my advice. So within 7 months, I think they had launched Arity. It's a platform for monetizing insurance data, pretty agile for a 90-year-old company. But not only that, their new CDO, who I met at an event, I think last week, recounted how after reading my infonomics book, they've actually designed their entire data and analytics operating model on these concepts of measuring, managing, and monetizing data as an actual asset. And they actually refer to this as their infonomic engine. So pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of infonomics, that's the perfect segue. I wanted to dive into that a little bit. I know you've written a couple of books, and I thought we would start with infonomics just to kind of drill down a bit. So along with the precursor to the term big data, you did coin this other word that I think has, taken on more usage in recent years, infonomics. For those that might be unfamiliar with the term, the Gartner definition of it is the emerging discipline of managing and accounting for information with the same or similar rigor and formality as other traditional assets and liabilities, such as, financial, physical, intangible assets, even human capital. So as the person who coined the term, I would love for you to just kind of break this down for us a little bit.
I think I wrote that definition too, but
I would bet so.
Well, I was at Gardner, yeah, but I think liabilities, we have to think about that one. Because a liability is something that you owe somebody else. And so very rarely do you actually owe data to anyone else. So I think of it more of more as an asset. So so breaking it down. So there's really the three main components of this are managing, monetizing, and measuring data as an actual asset. So I think what it comes down to is in meeting with and working with a large number of organizations while I was a Gartner and now at West Monroe. I have this hypothesis that organizations don't manage their data particularly well, certainly compared to the way that they manage their other assets, their physical assets or their financial assets or even their human capital. And I think it's because they don't measure it. We're not compelled to measure data as an asset according to current accounting practices. And so even though data meets the criteria of an asset is something that is defined as it's owned and or controlled, exchangeable for cash, and generates probable future economic benefits and is separable from other assets. So clearly data meets the criteria of an asset. It's just that the accountants haven't come around to acknowledging that too much. And so because organizations are not compelled to measure the value of their data, they don't manage it as well as they should. They say you can't manage what you don't measure. Yep. And then I also think it follows that any asset that you're not managing particularly well is one that you're not going to be able to monetize or generate economic benefits from as optimally as you should or could. So the idea behind infonomics is to kind of, as we Cubs fans used to say, right, to reverse the curse or flip the script and get companies to start measuring the value of their data. Therefore, they're in a better position to manage it better. And once the data is managed as an actual asset, then they can start generating all sorts of new value streams from it. So that's really that's really kind of the whole the crux of infonomics.
I love that. And you said a phrase that I oftentimes T2 as well, what gets measured gets managed, or a
Hmm.
version of that. And I see that so much in customer data territory, but, certainly in any data territory. But we just did a study, actually, we haven't published it yet, but I think it's coming out soon, where we were looking at data wastage and, even just
Hmm.
from a marketer's perspective, could
Yeah.
they effectively use all of their data, and there's always frustrations about things that might hold folks back from the optimal use of customer data. And
Hmm.
our research showed that on average, like a US marketing team is probably wasting about $6 million in data wastage, or wasted opportunity or wasted budget around not being able to optimize marketing spend because of sort of the inability to use data in the right way. And I
Right.
think it is, organizations are challenged with, how do we get our hands around the data and then truly, measure it, manage it, and use it to our best business impact, whether that's
Hmm.
revenue driving or savings driving or operational efficiency, all of those things that can come from that. So I really appreciate that lens that you brought to it.
Yeah, and think about it from an M&A perspective. I mean, how if you're acquiring a company and you haven't measured the value of their data assets or even assessed their data assets, I mean, that's a major part of what you're acquiring in a business today. At West Monroe, we do hundreds, almost I think 1,000 advisory deals for private equity firms, where we're looking not only at the tech stack, but also now at the data stack as well. Advising on any potential issues, compliance issues, quality issues, but also opportunistically, what could they do with this data that the company they're acquiring currently isn't doing today?
Mm-hmm,
We call that like that concept data diligence,
mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah.
part of overall due diligence.
Thank you so much, Doug, for a very fascinating and enlightening conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you,
And
Kelly.
I want to share with our folks that are listening that they can also visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews from Doug and from others. So thank you so much, Doug.